Hello everybody, my name's John Lacey and this is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming and content creation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've had a great week and I hope you're looking forward to a good weekend. Today on the show, we'll be answering some OBS Studio questions. So if you've got questions about OBS Studio, we'll be looking at that today. Let me know in the comments if you do, and I'd love to know where you're coming to me from today as well. We're going out live today on LinkedIn, Facebook, and also on YouTube. So it'd be great to hear from you. This is, of course, Coffee and Content. I'm sort of madly getting things ready to show you while I'm doing this, but I think let's take a sip of our coffee before we get started. I hope you have had a great week. Today we're going to be getting into some great questions about OBS Studio and do that thing there. It's really interesting. I'm just setting up a couple of things. Okay, so let's, like I say, yeah, we do have a number of questions to cover today. If you've got extra ones, please let me know in the comments. If we don't get time for them today, we can certainly cover them in a future session. So first of all, let's cover some of the basics because these are things that I get asked all the time. So what is OBS Studio anyway? OBS is free software for video recording and live streaming. It is available for Windows, Macs, and Linux. So how much does OBS Studio cost? OBS Studio is free and open source, so it doesn't cost you anything at all. Beware of any websites or social media posts offering a cracked version of the software. Only download it from the official website. So where can you download OBS Studio? Well, you can do that at obsproject.com. So we do have some questions that have come in during the week, which I do want to cover a little bit here. So we'll do that in just a second. I just want to get this ready for you. All right, cool. So we had a question about actually adding additional audio inputs as sources. So how do I add a second audio input as a source in addition to the default mic on my laptop? Let's have a look at that one. So I've got OBS Studio open over here. I might even just maximize that for the moment. In fact, let's not maximize it. Let me just resize it so you can see more of this on the screen. So this is what OBS Studio looks like. The question specifically is, okay, and we have a question from Mark about the teleport plugin. So we might come back to that. But first of all, in terms of the audio inputs, it does depend a little bit on what your audio devices actually are. So I've got the Rodecaster Pro, which is a great piece of equipment. It can give me 4 XLR microphone inputs that I can either bring in as a stereo track of all of the things together, or I can bring them in individually with the ASIO plugin, the Audio Stream Input Output plugin for OBS. So that can be quite useful, although I don't really recommend that for most people. I think if you are just getting started, a USB microphone is the way to go. The Shure MV7 is a great option. It's got the XLR and the USB-C connections, and Rode actually have a bunch of great USB microphones as well. I don't think you'd actually have a problem with bringing in multiple USB microphones into OBS as audio sources, but the one thing I would say is that it's important to keep in mind that OBS is quite a powerful piece of software, and you may have some issues bringing 2 USB microphones in as a single source in other programs like Microsoft Teams, for example. That said, Rode actually have special software that allows you to sort of combine those things as a single source, so that might be worth checking out. But essentially, what we want to do is if we go to our sources section, we can hit the plus icon, we can go to the audio input capture. We can give this a name. It's a good idea to give it a meaningful name. Let's just imagine that this is the laptop microphone. Make source visible will be on by default, and that's fine. We'll go OK. Then we'll actually get this dialog box sort of asking us which device we want to work with. So we've got a number of different things here. Let's just imagine, and you won't hear this audio because this is just my demonstration bit, but let's imagine the audio that we actually want is coming from my webcam. And it's probably not something I would personally recommend, but there we go. And, my webcam, which is not set up at the moment, but if I sort of click a little bit, you'll see that the audio mixer is bringing that in. And we can do that again for another microphone as well. So we can do that, and we'll just call this one microphone 2. I don't really have a great working example to show you of this, but again, let's just imagine that the audio coming in from my cam link, so that's on my camera, might be our second audio source. So, the best thing, I guess sort of another thing to think about is when you add these audio sources in, there are a few different things that you actually want to check. So if we want to go and have a look at our advanced audio settings, you can click on one of these icons over in our audio mixer, go to advanced audio properties, and you'll see a few different things which are probably worth checking out. So we've got our audio monitoring options. So this will indicate whether you want to have the audio go just to your stream, or if you want to hear it in your headphones as well. So basically, we've got the monitor off, which means that the stream will hear the audio, but you won't hear them in your headphones. The monitor only, so it won't go out to the stream, but it will go to your headphones, or both, the headphones and the output. And it's a really good idea to check that. I'm notoriously bad at adding videos and not checking that, that's actually going out to the stream. We've also got the ability to change the volume. You can either do this in decibels, or you can actually change this to percentages. You can check the balance. So if you want to pan it slightly left or right, or completely left or right, that's an option there as well. And we want to make sure that these are actually going out to the relevant tracks. So if none of these are selected, no one will hear this audio on your stream. So keep that in mind. There is also the ability to actually make changes down here. So again, you can literally just drag that to where you want it to be. Again, these audio sources here aren't particularly representative of what I'm actually working with for this stream, but we want to kind of stick into the yellow as much as possible and avoid going to the red. We don't want to distort too badly. It's important to keep in mind that these audio sources will only be available in scenes where they're present. So make sure if you do expect to hear from somebody that is on the scene they're in, but equally that gives you the flexibility of going, hey, actually, I don't want you in this scene. I want it just to be about the presenter, maybe not the interviewee. We can actually take them out of there. So that's a great way of working. All right, I do notice we have a few questions in the chat, and I'm really hoping we'll have time to get to these a little bit later on. Okay, so Bernard, in my case, it's an easier one. How to set up 3 USB cameras as different switchable sources in OBS, and if it's possible to record all 3 streams at the same time, in addition to the program out. Not understanding how the audio and tracks work. Why are there 6? Okay, so that's a great question. So essentially, the reason that there are 6 is because you can actually choose what goes out to different places. And if we go to our settings, and if you look at the stream setting, the video setting, I should say, one of these. It'll come to me eventually. Okay, there we go, the output settings. So here you'll actually see that you've got a number of different options. So depending on how you work with this, at the moment, if I were using this version as my live stream, and I'm not using this particular version, this is just for demonstration purposes, but whatever is selected here is what's going out to my stream. So if I brought in my microphone and I selected 2 to 6, but not the 1, that wouldn't actually end up on my live stream. And we can do that for recording and streaming. So we can sort of choose which versions of this we're working with. And there is also the possibility of potentially recording these separately depending on what other plugins you bring in. So for beginners, I recommend just to check them all and just make sure that it's definitely, at least on that first one, that you're working with. So that's an important consideration as well. We might come back to the question about the switchable sources, because I did have another question come in during the week, and I might just take a sip of coffee before we get into that one. So this is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming and content creation. My name's John Lacey, and today we're answering OBS Studio questions. And another one that came in during the week read, can you explain the difference between setting up sources and profiles for screen grabs on desktop versus shooting for mobile formats, 9:16 for YouTube Shorts and TikTok? Okay, that is a great question. And especially as we're moving into a place where and I personally don't record short form video in OBS Studio, but as we move into situations where Instagram and TikTok are making sort of vertical live streaming a thing, it's really good that we can actually do this within OBS. So the first thing you need to know is about changing your video size. So if you go to the File menu and go to the Settings, and we go to the Video category, basically, this is the dimensions we're mostly concerned about are here in the base canvas resolution. So at the moment, you'll see it's 1920 by 1080. So that's a standard 16 by 9. If we wanted to reverse that, we could go 1080x 1920. And if I go OK, you'll see that now this black section in the middle, which represents our workspace, is in that vertical format. Equally, if you wanted to, you could actually come in here and just make them both the same if you were working with some square video. So I'd probably recommend maybe 1080 by 1080. And that might be quite useful in different places. So just think about what you want to actually work with there. And it's a really good opportunity to sort of decide how you're working. And I guess one other thing I'll mention briefly is that if you are doing a lot of vertical video and horizontal video, the thing you need to know about this is that this is a program-wide setting. So whatever you do here is going to affect all of your settings everywhere. So that in itself is not a problem, but you will need to change settings back and forth. And I find if you're doing that a lot, it's probably worthwhile to check out actually running a portable version of OBS Studio and just having that permanently in vertical and maybe another one permanently in horizontal. And I do have a video on that as well. And you can head over to johnlacey.com and look at the information on that one. But essentially, that's the scene we're working with. So the question sort of spoke about, working with different scene collections. So if you don't know, a scene collection is basically a collection of scenes. It's literally what it says on the tin. But you can sort of come in here. You have options to create a new scene collection. You can duplicate an existing one. You can rename an existing one. You can remove them. You can import and export them as well. So what I would probably recommend is that, if you did have a number of these, if you create a new one, and make sure that you just name these really well, because after a while you can have quite a few of them and they can be, I would recommend actually putting vertical in here, and we'll say vertical format, and you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter as long as it makes sense to you. And then keep in mind that we have to go and change our setting in videos and change our base canvas resolution back to that 1080 by 1920 format. And again, this darker section in the middle is what we're working with. So this is where we can add our videos, our video sources, our images, our backgrounds, whatever we need to do into here. And that can be a really great way of actually working with these things. But I guess so in terms of working with those different scene collections, you do have that choice as well. And what I would probably recommend is if you are actually doing the same thing vertically and horizontally, is you can actually duplicate the scene, and it'll take all your images and all your sources and put them in a horizontal format. You will need to sort of go in and tweak some of those things manually. They will require a bit of change. But it is often better than starting completely from scratch. Okay, so another thing that can be quite useful if you're working with this vertical short form content is actually switching your monitor around. So I only discovered this recently, but I have two monitors and they're on monitor arms, and I can literally swivel it around so it's in a portrait format. Once you do that, you do need to sort of go and right click on your desktop, go to display settings. And I'll just drag that over here so you can see it. You'll see the two settings here. If you don't know which is which, you can hit identify and it'll actually put a number on each one so you know which is which, and I wanted to work with the number 1. And you know, if you can physically move your the orientation of your monitor, do so, and then just use one of these display orientation formats. So we have landscape, we have portrait, we have landscaped flipped and portrait flipped. And for me personally, I use the portrait flipped version, and that's really just because of the position of the cables that are on my particular monitor. So once I do that, I can twirl the screen around. It will sort of ask you if you're happy with those, to keep those changes, or if you want to revert to how it was previously. If you don't click keep changes, it will revert automatically after a certain amount of time has expired. So, you know, don't worry too much about that if that is a problem for you. It will resolve itself. But that's really great because you literally have sort of a portrait phone type of display at that point. You can capture the entire screen. Depending on the software you're using, you might be able to zoom in pretty well without sort of losing too much of that definition. Okay, so that's another option. And that's, to be honest, that's awesome. I guess the other thing I'll mention too is that if you can't physically move your monitor, there are a number of portable USB-C displays that are available now, and some of them can work in horizontal or vertical formats. So, you know, if you spend a few $100s on that, that may be another way of doing this. Of course, you know, if you don't have the option of moving your monitor into that portrait format, there is another thing we can do. And I've spoken a little bit about this previously, but I think it's really, really important. So this is Microsoft Power Toys. This is actually a series of utilities that are from Microsoft. It's free to download. It's pretty much in permanent beta, which is interesting. And if you head over to johnlacey.com, you can grab a link to this. But we have a whole bunch of different features, and some of these are really, really cool. Some of them I've barely touched at all, but I imagine they're probably awesome. So the one I'm most interested in, though, is Fancy Zones. So Fancy Zones allows you to create sort of snappable regions on your screen that you can move applications into. So if you install Power Toys, go to Power Toys, pick the Fancy Zone section, make sure it's actually enabled here. We have a bit of a toggle to make sure that that is on. And you have the ability to actually use the launch the layout editor. So if I click on this one, I'm never really sure how well this is captured in the live streams, but we have sort of done this before. So essentially, you can see my two screens here. And again, if I had one in vertical, I'd already have the advantage there. But because they're both horizontal, what we can do is if we go down and click create a new layout, move that just there. We can give this a name, and I'll say screen for vertical video. You can call it whatever you like. And we do have these two options. So you can create layouts based on grids, but in this case, I'm going to go with creating a layout with the canvas. So the benefit of the canvas is you can have overlapping zones. So if I click create, we've got this first section. At the moment, it's 768 times 432 pixels. So we can literally just drag this around to position it on the screen. And basically, I did a little bit of math. What I want to do is make sure that this is at least 10,040 pixels tall. Oh. It'd be so great if I could punch some numbers in to do this, but you do need to use your mouse for this. And 585 pixels wide. So let's just drag that in. Okay, so that's our region, and that's basically a smaller version of our vertical format. So what I'll do now is I'll just create another zone on this same screen just to use the other space, because I kind of want to show you an application here and also OBS side by side. So again, I'm not as concerned about the dimensions of this one. I'm just going to sort of fill the available space. So once I've got those two there, I can go save and apply. And I can actually close out of Power Toys, and I'll move that out of the way. So it may not be completely obvious what is happening here. So let me just bring us another source in so I can show you. Shout out to Garen Perkins, who's on Team OBS. That's great to see. So what we can do now, I've created those two regions, and one of them is specifically sized in such a way that it will be vertical. So if I drag this, and this is just a Chrome browser, so that's our second region. But if I drag this over into the one we've specifically created for that purpose, and I can drag OBS into this other location, and we can actually go in and create a new source over here, which will be a window capture. And we'll just call this johnlacey.com. Doesn't really matter what you call them as long as they're meaningful to you. It's actually found it for me automatically. So we do have options to capture the cursor if we want to. We can turn that on or off depending on what we're working with. And essentially I've got it here. We can resize this however we like, but the nice thing about this is I can right click, I can go to transform, and I can go to fit to screen, which has the keyboard shortcut Control F. And essentially now I've got something that's roughly vertical format. I must admit it's not completely 1080, it's 1040 as you may have noted earlier. The reason I did that initially was simply because the other screen I was working on had the Windows start bar and it seemed to be taking up 40 pixels of space. But I guess the other thing too is once you upload this video to one of the vertical format places, there's often some text at the bottom of this, so we may not want to obscure that anyway. Another thing you can do is, you can actually crop any of these things. So if I were to hold down the Alt key and drag in, hang on, let me try that again. Hold down Alt, drag that in so I can crop out the top of my browser. I might want to get rid of that sidebar as well. We've got that there. And again, obviously I'm already using my camera to talk to you on the live stream, but if I've got my green screen, I could appear in front of this, I could record it. I could be very, very easily and quickly in a position where I can actually, have some video in that format. And again, if I was happy with this scene collection, we spoke about this earlier, but maybe I want to duplicate this. So it says vertical format, and I'll call this horizontal format. Again, keep in mind that we do need to change that base canvas size. So if I go to File, Settings, I can go to Video. I'll just switch those around. So we'll go 1920 by 1080 and go OK. I probably want to actually maximize this here. And you'll see that it's already, in some ways, it's already tried to fit this into place. Again, let's just take the lazy approach and go to Transform and go to Fit to Screen. Again, we've got that there. I can bring my camera in with the green screen on the top of there. I can record the same sort of presentation a second time, and I've got essentially horizontal and vertical formats of the same thing. You probably do want to take them into some video editing software to make them short and snappy. That's really what the TikTok, YouTube short audience is looking for. So it's really good if you can sort of give yourself that flexibility. And again, if we go back to our vertical format, you'll see again, because I've resized this, it's in a weird place, but because I've got that in there, I can click on it, I can snap it into place. I've got to make sure I actually change that back. So our video size, so go back to video, 1080 by 1920. And again, this is the reason I do sort of encourage people to run portable versions, so you're not changing this setting forever. But it's actually not that difficult to bring some of these things together. Hello, Garen Belaney. So we have Garen Perkins and Garen Belaney both in the chat, which is lovely to see. Some great content creators doing really interesting things, particularly on LinkedIn, but also elsewhere as well. I must admit, I did not know a single person named Garen before I joined LinkedIn, so it's cool that I know two of you now. All right, so I want to sort of go back to the question about the switchable cameras, but again, I've been talking quite a lot, so I'm going to take a little bit more coffee. This is Coffee and Content, the weekly live stream about video, live streaming, and content creation. We are talking all things OBS, and Garen Perkins is definitely on Team OBS. And I know Garen Blaney is too, so it's great to have them both here today. So I'm trying to answer as many of your questions as possible. We are sort of nearing the time of this session, but I do want to come back to a question about... And Mark Fraser has actually asked about the teleport plugin. I'm not familiar with that one. I might need to do a bit of research and get back to you on that one. But what I do want to have a look at is this one here, and it's actually a little bit too wide for my comments. So I'll take it off the screen, but it says, in my case, it's an easier one. How to set up three USB cameras as different switchable sources in OBS. And if it's possible to record all three streams at the same time in addition to the program out. I guess the answer to that one is yes, it's definitely easier to record all those sources. And I'm not really sure if, when you talk about the three USB cameras, if they're all on the same computer or if people are joining remotely from other computers. But either way, there are sort of ways of doing this. So one thing that is quite useful is actually the record source, the source record plugin. So you can actually add that to individual. I don't think I've actually got it installed here. I'd love to show you that in context. But I don't think I can actually. So I'll talk you through it. We do have another video on that. So maybe I will link that up for you. You can head over to, in fact, it's over here on johnlacey.com. So if you have a look at this 6 OBS Studio plugins, Sam, Proof, and I spoke about some of our favorite plugins. It helps if I'm actually sharing the screen so you know what I'm talking about. So here, over on johnlacey.com, Sam and I spoke about some of our favorite plugins. One of the ones that Sam referenced specifically was Source Record. So essentially, you can actually add, you install this plugin, you add it as a filter. So you can right-click on either an individual source or a scene. So, you know, if we were to... And again, I don't really have it installed here, but essentially what you do is you go to Filters, you go the Add here, and you'll actually have one that says Source Record. You can actually put that on either a scene or a source, so either the webcam itself or maybe an individual scene that the particular webcam lives in. And you can record it in that sense. I guess in terms of the switchable sources, you have a couple of different options. Either you create a scene with each camera in it, and maybe a scene with all three of them in there together, and you can switch between those scenes. So, you know, if I have, you know, to create new scenes, we can sort of, and again, I probably need to resize this so you get a better sense of how this works. So down here in the scenes, we can create a new scene, and we could say maybe camera 1. We could come in here and add the USB camera, which would be a video capture device. And we could do that for all three of them. We can also bring them in together. And at that point, you can either, and again, I really don't, I've got a webcam that's sort of pointed at nothing in particular. I think we'll use that for the purposes of today, but just be warned, it does not look at anything. So that would be this one here. And it's stuck on my desk and it's hidden under a whole bunch of cables, so it's not particularly useful. But in principle, what you can do is you can either, and we might just transform and go fit screen. So you can actually add that filter to the source itself or to the scene. But just keep in mind that the source record can be a little bit resource intensive. It can slow down your computer if it's not a fast computer. So keep that in mind. But essentially what you can do, you can either switch between scenes, or you could actually have all three web cameras on this scene, and you can just toggle hide and show with that little eye icon. And if you've got a Stream Deck, this is a great opportunity to actually set up a button for that specifically. So that's certainly one way of doing things. So keep that in mind. That's an option. Maybe we can have a longer discussion about this in a future session. So yeah, as I say, we're kind of over our traditional amount of time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've learned a little bit about OBS. I know it's a lot to unpack. If you head over to johnlacey.com, you'll see that I've got articles about OBS Studio and a number of videos. You can also follow along wherever you're watching this particular video as well. So thank you for joining me. Have a good week. I'm going to go and drink the rest of my coffee, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much.